It's time for Mary Holm, our personal finance expert, who joins us with some interesting thoughts on Kiwisaver today. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Jesse.
How to pick your Kiwisaver funds.
Yeah, look, I think, most people out there are in Kiwisaver now, and probably a lot of them have got a nagging feeling about whether they're in the right fund for them.
Yeah.
But they think, oh, God, I can't be bothered, doing the research to change funds. And it's the same as a whole lot of other things. Like I did change my power company a while back, and it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
But before you think, oh, I'll do that next week, And I think that's similar with Kiwisaver, that people think it's not easy to change funds, but it can make a huge difference to how much you have at retirement or for your first home, or just how comfortable you feel going through the ride. And it's not hard. It really isn't. I've got 4 steps, and they're pretty simple steps. Actually, only 3 that you kind of have to do. There's kind of 4th.
And you talk about changing
one.
providers or funds or?
Both.
Yeah.
And/or, yes, yeah. The first step, and the most important one by far, is to work out what is the best risk level for you. I was actually alarmed to read recently that the majority of people with one of the big providers who are going to take money out for their first home are in high-risk funds and growth or aggressive funds. Now, that's fine if they're not expecting to own the home for 10 years, to buy the home for 10 years. But I would expect many of them are planning to buy it sooner. And look, that's a pretty risky game, putting your money for a first home in a higher risk fund, especially if you're planning to buy it in the next few years, because the markets might crash, right? Even you might have lined the house up and everything, and suddenly, your money's worth 2/3 of what, or even half what it was.
Yeah, even I did that actually, and I was a devotee of the Church of Mary at the time. But I just kind of didn't think about it because I thought, well, I'm young as I was then.
Yes.
I'll have it in a high risk fund. But
yes.
So if you're about to retire, or if you're going to use it for your house,
that's
you should
right.
be taking that risk level down.
So people too often just think it's an age thing, but it isn't. It's approaching retirement or about to buy, or thinking even within 10 years of buying your first home. Then you want to lower your risk a bit. So the most important thing is to see if you're in the right risk level for you. And even if you only do this, that's a very important step. So the easy way to do it is to go to the Kiwisaver Fund Finder on sorted.org. I mean, there's a lot of other online tools, but this is the one that's unbiased and works best, I think. And basically, you just answer 3 questions. One of them is about when you're likely to spend the money, and 2 of them are about how much volatility you can cope with, sort of psychologically. And then it'll just tell you, hey, you should be in a balanced fund, or you should be in a defensive fund, or whatever. So I just want to I've got a note here about the noting that the average returns in the different risk levels, just some new data out. Morningstar puts out a quarterly Kiwisaver report, and they had 10-year average returns on the lowest risk funds were 4%, and then the next one was 5%, the next was 7%, the next was 8%, and the next was 9.5%. So there is a clear correlation between whether you're going to go into a riskier, i.e. more volatile fund, and the long-term returns you'll get. But if you're going to spend the money soon, the higher the risk, the more the chances that it might crash right at the wrong moment. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
what's tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is to then once you've established what's the right risk level for you, then you want to choose a fund at your risk level. And so you're looking at providers here, really. You're saying, okay, I'm with provider X, and you might want to just stay with that provider and move to the correct risk level for you. But you might as well, while you're at it, have a look and see if there's a better provider for you. And for this one, I recommend using the Smart Investor tool, which is on the Sorted website, which we've talked about before. It's a great tool. So on that tool, you're choosing whether you go with Kiwisaver or other funds, and So then you'd select the funds that are at your risk level. So let's say you've established you should be in a balanced fund, perhaps because you're planning to spend the money fairly soon and you don't want anything too volatile. So you have a look at all the balanced funds, and I suggest you sort them by fees. So you can sort on that website, you can sort them by returns, fees, and how many how risky the fund is. And I would highly recommend you do it by fees, and then have a look at 4 or 5 that charge the lowest fees, and choose from those. And everybody just about says, hey, no, I don't want to go with the lowest fees. I want to go with the best returns, the highest returns. And the danger with that is, and it's a really big danger, is that what's done well in the past won't do well in the future. And I was just looking at the numbers. I won't go through this whole table with you because it's a bit hard on radio. But basically, I was looking at the best fund at each risk level, so from defensive to conservative to balanced to growth to aggressive. Let's have a look at which provider performed best over the last 10 years. Well, how do they do it after the last 3 months? All but one of those 5 was in the bottom 3 in the last 3 months.
That's so funny.
So they're all over the place. I mean, if so, and your response to that might be, well, I'm better to look at the best long-term returns, not the short-term, and I absolutely agree with that. But on the other hand, the ones that have done well over the long term and are suddenly not doing well, and this seems to be a common phenomenon, it might be because they've lost the trick. Maybe the person that chooses the investments is no longer there, or they're quite often the ones that have performed really well are ones that kind of go out on a limb and perhaps take more risk or do something a little bit different. And that might work really well, and they come in as the winner over 10 years. But then suddenly the markets change, and that particular tactic is not a good one anymore.
It's also, I won't get deeply into this, but you've talked about survival bias before, right? The funds that make it all the way to 10 years are likely to be successful.
Yes.
And the ones that haven't done so well sort of drop off along the way.
That's really true, yes. That's a really interesting phenomenon. And so, yes, there's a lot of funds in these reports, a lot more that have been in for 3 years or 5 years than there have been for 10 years. And yes, the ones that have done really badly over 10 years have gone, so...
And you won't be able to see who owned those funds.
No.
They'll disappear.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, and so there's
That's
a
what
real...
I'd do, Mary. I'd close down the bad ones and say, hey, look how well our firm's doing.
Yeah, look, and I'm sure that's what happens. And so It is true that I'd rather people looked at long-term returns than short-term returns, but I suggest you look at fees more because returns are all over the place. By all means, exclude ones that have done really badly over the 10 years. When you're looking at the low-fee ones, if some of them have done really badly, you might want to cross them off your list. But I really suggest people don't go with the ones that have done well. That's a tactic of mine. Choosing low fee funds has served me well over decades, actually, long before Kiwisaver. So, so here you are. You've got 4 or 5 of the lowest fee funds at your risk level. How do you choose from amongst them? Well, there's a couple of suggestions on that. On that same Smart Investor tool, there's quite a lot of information. If you just click on the name of the fund, it's summarised, but it tells you what sort of investments they're in, the 10 biggest investments, which is always quite interesting. Just have a little look at that list. It tells you the key personnel, which might include somebody well known. For the most part, most people won't know what that means. But and one thing that, and actually, I think I was the one that suggested when Sorter was putting together this tool, because I was a bit involved in helping them do it. I said, get the providers to say in 20 words or less, what's different about this fund? What's special about it?
That's a really good idea.
So it's just a quick summary of so you can get an idea from all of that and hopefully choose one. Don't dither too much. If you can't decide between two, just go with one of them.
Yeah.
But the final thing is whether you're concerned about the ethics of their investing. And Mindful Money is the website to go to for that, and you can key in the Kiwisaver fund you're thinking about, and they'll tell you this one's got all sorts of investments in armaments and animal cruelty and human rights violations, or it's got a really clean bill of health. So some people might even want to look at that early on in their search. They say, okay, once I've established what risk I want, I'm going to go with the ones with a clean bill of health. So Mindful Money is a really good, useful website that tells people about that, if that's something that matters to you.